I had no idea that I was in a toxic relationship. And looking back, I didn't know what red flags that I needed to take seriously and what green flags need to be present for this relationship to actually work. And that cost me a lot of time and unnecessary pain. And when you're called crazy for long enough, you start to believe them, don't you? When you're constantly labeled as the problem, it's easier to just stay silent instead of arguing and having another fight. And plus, they say it with so much confidence, you start to think, maybe there's some truth to it, right? And so you read all the books on self-improvement, you watch all the videos, you try to self-reflect and take accountability, you always end up apologizing first. You learn how to communicate, so hopefully you won't trigger them anymore, because you just want this relationship to work. Here's my question for you. Do they want this relationship to work? Is that their goal? Are they interested in doing the work of self-reflection or healthy communication or taking accountability? Or do they view those things as a waste of time? Because after all, it's not them who needs to change, it's you. That's why this information is so important, because there's no amount of self-improvement that's going to fix their anger issues or inspire them to change, right? And if we aren't careful, we can get stuck in these types of relationships where we know there's something wrong. We know we deserve better, but we just can't seem to leave. Or at least that's how I felt. Because toxic relationships steal a lot of things from us, and one of those is our self-trust. We don't know what we're allowed to need without feeling selfish. We don't know what boundaries we're allowed to set without feeling like we're being difficult, right? We don't trust ourselves, because when we finally speak up, when we talk about our feelings, we're immediately invalidated. We're labeled as difficult. We're labeled as too much, too sensitive. And so we just end up continuing to second guess ourselves and overthink and constantly feel confused or anxious. That's what I want to talk about today. I want to help you understand those patterns just a little bit better. And I want to give you the compassion and grace that you might not be giving yourself. But I also want to hold you accountable. I want to remind you of what you deserve in a relationship. And I want you to be able to answer honestly, is this actually love, or could I be stuck in a trauma bond? And please remember two things. One, if I say something that resonates with you, please take that to a counselor that you trust and talk with them about it. And two, if you feel like you're in an abusive situation, the first step is not to learn how to communicate better or even to set healthy boundaries or advocate for your needs. The first step is always to get out and get safe. All right, so let's answer the question, what is a trauma bond? A trauma bond is an intense, unhealthy attachment between two people who are caught in a dysfunctional relationship that is either toxic or abusive. Now, this type of bond typically happens when one partner is manipulative, controlling, or abusive, and the other partner feels unable to leave due to emotional dependency, fear of being alone or abandoned, feeling like they have a sense of loyalty to that partner, even if they are being mistreated. Now, that's different than what I initially thought a trauma bond was. I thought that was when you had a shared history of trauma together, like you both grew up in an abusive or neglectful home, and you bonded together about that trauma. And that might be part of it, but it's not the full picture. The full picture is that there's a cycle of intermittent abuse or mistreatment in your relationship, followed by positive reinforcement. So you're being mistreated and hurt on one side of the cycle, but then that person switches and they love bomb you and they give you attention and affection. They talk about how much they appreciate you, how devastated they would be if you ever left. And they only see a future with you, right? They might even acknowledge that they've mistreated you in the past. But then, randomly, the cycle starts over again and they're belittling and demeaning you again. Now, on the surface, it might seem illogical to most people. Why would you stay in a relationship when you're clearly being mistreated? And the answer is simple and complex. The truth is, we stay because the mistreatment or abuse is infrequent enough to keep us confused in the present and also hopeful for the future. And we're not here to victim blame in any capacity, but sometimes the reason we stay is because we simply don't know what real love is supposed to look and feel like. Maybe you grew up around chaos and love was unpredictable then too. Maybe you grew up feeling like you had to earn love and affection. Maybe there was some violence in your childhood. Maybe it's normal for you to feel blamed and shamed and talked down to. Those words feel unfortunately familiar. You're used to people exploding in rage and then literally acting like nothing happened and you should just act normal. You're used to being labeled as too much or not enough. You're used to never hearing the words, "I'm sorry, that was wrong." And instead you heard, "Why did you make me do that?" So where other people in that situation might think, this is clearly toxic, I deserve better than this, I'm leaving, your subconscious says, maybe this isn't that bad. Maybe this is just the way love is. No relationship is perfect, right? And I love them. Plus, what if I leave and I'm wrong? The grass isn't greener and now I'm just alone. But the truth is, you'll never feel more alone than in a toxic relationship where you aren't valued or prioritized. And this isn't love, it's survival. Your nervous system is actually finding safety within the unpredictability. That chaos, the roller coaster highs and lows, actually feels familiar. And our brains almost always choose familiar over different, even if different is healthy. So the fifth sign that you might be in a trauma bond is that it feels impossible to leave, but staying is killing you. And I don't know if this was the case for you, but for me, I felt addicted to my partner. The highs were so high and we were on cloud 9, and the lows were terrible, but my brain was kind of trained to just wait for the highs again. And this is so important in hindsight. During those lows where you have those terrible fights or when they say and do terrible things to you, but then somehow you make up together, it's easy to mistake that for bonding. Like you went through battle together, right? You guys have been through so much together. You feel this deep connection with this person. But that's not connection. It's chaos. It's not love. It's survival. Don't let them manipulate you into thinking that those fights are actually making you stronger together. They're not. You've been through so much together because you've endured their abuse. It's just another way that they manipulate and control people. We've been through so much together. Yeah, well, you didn't have to put me through that. They chose to be abusive and put this relationship through hell. That wasn't something that you went through together. It's something that was preventable and caused you a great amount of pain. They didn't go through the pain with you. They caused the pain. And the crazy thing about trauma bonds, at least in my experience, was the fact that I never wanted to hurt them, right? Even if they hurt me, I never wanted to hurt them. But abusive people will 100% use that against us. And what I realized was I was trying to give them what I felt like I didn't get as a child. I always wanted to give them unconditional love and acceptance. I was trying to be the most consistent, most loving, most considerate person in their life. The only problem was they weren't a safe place for that kind of love. They would take it, use it up, and then spit it back out. I wanted to save them from their pain, right? I saw their anger and rage as areas where I could help them heal. I wanted to fix them with love. I wanted to be their savior because if I could save them, then they would love me forever, right? They would prioritize me. They would see me as valuable. The only problem is most people don't want to be saved, especially toxic people. They see your healthy habits as a threat. They aren't interested in healing because then that means that they're admitting that they're flawed in some way. So instead of admitting that they need to change, they simply will project their own shame onto you. You get the insults that they're actually subconsciously afraid is true about themselves. And I would get caught in this cycle where eventually I would get fed up and try to convince myself to leave, only to have them sense that they were losing me and switch back to their gentle, loving self. They would apologize and give me the connection and closeness that I had been craving. Or they would shame spiral and talk about what a terrible person they were and how I should just leave them. Which, interestingly enough, activated my fear of abandonment and caused me to switch back into a caretaking role and shift my attention to reassuring and validating them instead of actually being assertive about the change that I needed to see in this relationship. And the cycle would just repeat itself. And one of the reasons that psychologists say that these relationships are so difficult to leave is that we are subconsciously repeating old childhood wounds from the past, hoping that we can bring them into the present. And if we can heal this dynamic in the present, then it will also heal our childhood. So it makes sense that as a child, you were dependent on your parents, or at least one of them. You were attached to them, regardless of how healthy or safe that attachment was. So in the case of an unhealthy attachment, sometimes we recreate those attachments later in life subconsciously, hoping that if we can heal this one in the present, if we can get this person to love us in the way we wanted mom or dad to, then ultimately we can feel valuable and worthy of love. But that's not what happens. What happens is we just set ourselves up to be hurt. And even though it's extremely difficult, it's our job to remember, I'm not a kid anymore. I don't need to abandon myself in order not to be abandoned. No one can abandon me. I am safe and complete and whole all on my own. I choose to add someone to my life. I don't need to stay in relationships that are unhealthy or dysfunctional. I know that's not easy, but it is necessary. All right, so let's move on to the fourth sign that you might be in a trauma bond, and that is the double standard. You would never get away with treating them the way they treat you. Just think about what would happen if you treated them the exact same way they treat you. What would happen if you interrupted them, you talked down to them, you used the same words that they describe you to them? What if you matched their energy and attention? What if you flirted with people like they do? What if you dismissed their concerns like they do yours? What names would you be called? You will never feel safe and loved in a relationship where there's no equality or mutual respect. It's never okay. And in trauma-bonded relationships, there's almost always a power dynamic. They have the power, you're expected to submit, not the other way around. There's a double standard. You would never even think about treating them the exact same way that they treat you consistently. And I know it's not much, but you need to hear someone say it out loud in your direction. You deserve real love. You deserve to feel safe and held in your relationships. You're not too needy. You're not too sensitive. You deserve someone who considers you, who elevates you, who admires you, who appreciates you. You deserve someone who wants to know how you feel loved because they want you to feel prioritized. You deserve someone who is just as concerned with hearing and understanding your feelings and pain as you are with finding the right words so they don't feel attacked, right? Because you are valuable and you deserve kindness and respect. And I don't need you to just hear that. I need you to believe it. I need you to tell it to yourself until you know it's true. Because the truth is there's a lot of different types of abuse, right? And they're all destructive. Emotional abuse is often subtle and difficult to spot, but the goal is still the same: manipulation and control. And when someone gaslights you and blames you and invalidates and dismisses you, belittles you, tries to humiliate you, constantly criticizes you, it slowly destroys our self-esteem and self-worth. So I just want to remind you, someone saying these things consistently with no repair or change is emotional abuse. And someone who truly loves you and cares for you will not say these things. Things like, "You're just too sensitive. That never happened. You're crazy. You're stupid. Nobody else would put up with you like I do. What's wrong with you? You'll never see your kids again if you ever leave. If you don't let me go through your phone, then you're admitting to cheating, right? You're so dramatic. Well, I wouldn't have done that if you would have just listened to me. You're too emotional. Everyone knows you're the problem in our relationship. I'll hurt myself if you ever leave me." Just saying those things breaks my heart for any person who has to endure hearing things like that. Because the truth is, it leaves us feeling crazy and confused and anxious and heartbroken all at the same time. We're constantly questioning whether we're the problem in this relationship. We feel so alone and inadequate and powerless. But I just want to remind you that you're not powerless. You're just stuck, and you can get unstuck. What I need you to realize in this moment is that the chronic presence of someone saying phrases like that with no repair, no accountability, that's abuse. And I know it can be really hard to label that because it's just words, right? But it's 100% abuse, and any professional will tell you the same thing. And I don't say any of that to shame you. I say it because when I've heard some of those things in the past, I would internalize them, right? I already felt like I was too much, not enough, broken, flawed. So when I would hear that echoed back to me, I would think, maybe they're right. I wouldn't set healthy boundaries. I wouldn't advocate for my needs. I wouldn't leave that dynamic. I would think, maybe they're right. Maybe I am too needy. And then I would try to prove my worth and value to them. And then the cycle would just continue. And I don't want that for anyone else. That brings us to sign number 3 that you might be in a trauma bond, and that's you take all the responsibility in the relationship. The truth is, they've probably done a good job at isolating you from your friends and family, but every once in a while, information gets leaked about something that they did, and you make sure to clean it up so they don't look like the bad person. Maybe you minimize it, maybe you justify it. Nobody's perfect. They had a rough childhood. They're working on it. They were just stressed. And we do this for a few different reasons. One, we feel shame about the relationship baseline, right? So we're just trying to avoid those feelings or explanations to other people. But 2, it's just easier to try to justify it rather than admit how terrible it was. Because once again, that just leaves us feeling more ashamed that we're even in this spot. But what ends up happening is we just end up feeling like we're getting a degree in narcissism, right? We're researching all the best ways to communicate so they don't lash out or take everything that we say as an attack. We know their triggers better than anyone. And we've gotten really good at walking on eggshells because we never know which version of them is going to walk in the door, right? So we need to be ready. And worse, we've convinced ourselves that that's loving. We think that that's consideration. But what it actually is enabling. We're doing their work for them. We're regulating their emotions for them so we can feel safe and regulated. We've become their emotional caretaker. And for me, there was even a small part that I enjoyed that because I felt like I was needed, right? Without me, this person would completely fall apart. They would lose their job, their car, their house. I mean, they need me. But when we do the emotional labor of 2 people in a relationship, when all the repair falls on our shoulders, the result isn't peace. It's exhaustion and eventual resentment because you know deep down they're taking advantage of you. And it's not your job to teach someone else how to be a mature, healthy adult. You're saving them from the consequences of their own actions, just like mommy and daddy might have, which is perhaps why they act so entitled and narcissistic in the first place. And on that subject, let me just say, we expend so much mental energy trying to make sense of their behavior. You've spent hours researching, are they a narcissist? Are they avoidant? What about their childhood past that I can figure out? But the truth is, it doesn't matter what they are. Stop banging your head against the wall trying to make sense of their behavior. Maybe you don't understand it because you would never treat someone that way. And I'm a very empathetic person, but I don't care that they had a rough childhood, right? We all had rough childhoods. We can't let our past trauma impact how we show up and hurt other people in the present, right? We're all accountable for that. So no, I don't care that they had a rough childhood. Stop making excuses for them. I bet they don't call their boss the same names that they call you. That means that they can be respectful when it benefits them. A much better question than is this person a narcissist is, do I feel valued in this relationship? Am I considered an equal? Do I feel safe and supported? Are my feelings and needs validated? Because if the answer is no, I don't care what you want to label this person as. It doesn't matter. It's not a sustainable relationship. And this is where tough love comes to you. It's your job to know that you deserve to be an equal in a relationship. You deserve to feel supported and loved and valued consistently, not randomly, right? And that's so hard to know, but that's our work. It's our work to recognize the block. When you're sitting there saying, I know that all this stuff is true logically, but I can't leave. That's okay if that's where you are, but that's not where you need to stay. Personally, healing didn't start until I started challenging my distorted beliefs. So when I would say, I can't leave, I had to learn to stop myself and remind myself that's not actually true. I could leave. It just would mean that I'd have to face the panic that I'm feeling in my body thinking about it. It would mean that I'd have to face the fear of potentially being single. It would mean that I would have to wrestle with the guilt of leaving them, especially when they start to say that I'm abandoning them when they need me the most. And it took me a long time to realize I'm not abandoning them. They caused this. They chose to push me out of this relationship. I offered countless opportunities to repair and heal through books and counseling, and whatever the case may be, they had no interest in that. Until now. Now they say they'll do anything, right? I wouldn't believe them if I were you. If there's been a pattern of abuse, why do you think giving them another chance is going to be different than all the other chances you've given them? They haven't shown they're trustworthy, plain and simple. That brings us to the second sign that you might be in a trauma bond, and that's you're afraid to be honest. Honestly, you're terrified to think of what would happen if you actually set a boundary or advocated for your needs, right? And sadly, you've probably stopped thinking about those things altogether because your partner has convinced you you're the selfish one in this relationship, right? So setting boundaries or talking about your needs would only add fuel to that fire. So you just stay quiet. The only problem is relationships can't survive without honesty. And you weren't meant to operate from a place of fear all the time. It changes your body. Your cortisol levels are through the roof. That's why you're so anxious. That's why you can't sleep at night. That's why you feel so angry, because your body knows this is unfair. And that's part of the cycle. We suppress our feelings and needs. We stay quiet to keep the peace. We chronically put their needs above our own. We abandon ourselves so we won't get abandoned. But where does that leave us? It left me resentful. And then the next time that they picked a fight, the next time they were belittling or shaming, instead of staying quiet, I lashed out and exploded. And all that unprocessed pain came to the surface, and I ended up saying terrible things to them. And a truly toxic person will always use that moment to shame us. They will point back to that moment over and over again and hold it over your head as a justification for why they're allowed to mistreat you because, hey, you're just as bad. And since you most likely struggle with self-esteem and shame issues, you'll beat yourself up for exploding, right? But the problem never gets resolved. The problem of them chronically neglecting or demeaning or belittling you never gets repaired. And so the cycle is just going to repeat itself. And like I said, I know these are just words, but you deserve someone who wants you to be honest with them. You deserve someone who encourages your authenticity. You deserve someone who won't judge you or look down upon your needs. You deserve someone who you feel safe enough with to share what's on your heart. Even if it's messy and you're still figuring it out, you deserve someone who wants to understand it with you, who says, let's figure this out together as a team because I care. That person is out there for you. And if I was in your spot, even right now, listening to this can bring up a lot of shame because you know you deserve better and you beat yourself up for being in this relationship and not being able to set healthy boundaries. And I just need you to know You're doing a good job. You're fighting against deeply ingrained old wounds and patterns. Give yourself grace and compassion that you're even willing to try to create some new pathways in your brain that feel very unfamiliar. That brings us to the number one sign that you might be in a trauma bond, and that's that you see them as the cause of your pain, but also the potential source of your healing. This is why trauma bonds mess with our mind, because we view them as the cause of our pain, but we also see them as the source of our healing. Right? We always try to get back to the way things were. But what you need to know is sometimes that wasn't real. Sometimes you were being manipulated. You were being love bombed, right? So that you would attach to them and bond to them so that they could start a cycle of abuse and you wouldn't leave. Because once you're attached to them, you'll try to make it work because you love them, right? And like I said earlier, I'm glad that you love hard, but you need to be selective about who you're giving that love to. And I think one of my biggest problems was that I was looking to them specifically to validate my own worth and value. I needed external validation. And of course, some amount of that is healthy, right? If we love someone and they're upset with us, it's normal to feel bad. But when it becomes a big problem is when someone else doesn't see me as valuable or worthy of kindness and respect, and I start to believe that. It becomes a problem when someone else's needs and issues take center stage and I drop everything else to fix or be with them, even though that never gets reciprocated to me. Because deep down, I believe I have to be of service to be loved and valuable, right? And that's where our external validation turns on us. I understand that it just feels easier to keep putting effort into this relationship. It feels like if we gave up, we'd be giving up on them, we'd be giving up on ourselves, we'll have wasted all this time. But you're not wasting time by leaving unhealthy or dysfunctional or toxic relationships where the other person has no interest in healing or validating your perspective. And I know that's really hard to believe right now, but it's not a waste of time. You aren't going to regret this. They aren't going to go find someone new and treat them better than you. You aren't going to end up feeling alone forever. The truth that I had to realize is that I was just avoiding feelings of fear, right? Fear of being alone, fear of making a mistake, fear of them forgetting about me and being happy with someone else, fear of not being accepted. The hardest work was turning all of that to myself and giving myself the validation that I deserve, pouring into me again, learning about what makes me happy, right? It's not selfish to pour into your own cup so you have something to actually pour into others. And I don't mean for this to come out the wrong way, but if you found out that your child was going to be treated exactly the same way in their future relationship as you're being treated in this one, and that causes you to be sick to think about, that's your sign to get out. Because you're that little boy. You're that little girl. What makes you any different than them besides age? Sometimes we get so blinded by trying to fix our own circumstances that we forget that we would never want anyone else to go through what we're going through. We would want them to find the courage to leave, or if it's safe, only if it's safe, to demand to be treated better and learn about setting healthy boundaries and advocating for their needs as a first step to seeing if this relationship can be salvaged. Because that's what you deserve. You deserve for your pain and feelings and needs to be explored and understood, just as you do for other people. You deserve to be validated. You don't need to just do all the validating, right? And you don't just deserve these things, you need it for your relationship to ever have a chance. It's not optional. Your pain has to be explored or else this is doomed. Suppressing it and pretending like you just forgive them and move on, it's not going to work. You'll just be distant and bitter because you won't actually trust them, nor should you. So to close, I don't know where you're at in this journey. My goal isn't for you to just explore another label to research. Is this a trauma bond or is it not? My goal is for you to ask yourself, do I feel safe in this relationship? Do I feel safe to be honest and vulnerable and authentic? Do I understand what I'm allowed to need in this relationship and not feel selfish about that, right? Does my partner actually care about my feelings and needs? Am I loving myself or do I feel like I'm losing myself? Do I feel confused all the time? These are questions we need to answer. Is this stuff hard? 100% this stuff is hard. You're attempting to break generational cycles of trauma. Yeah, this is really hard. That's why you need to give yourself so much grace and compassion, but also hold yourself accountable, right? And that's why you also, if possible, you need to talk to a professional about this stuff. We've all needed help at certain points in our life. I know I do. I still need help with this stuff. If you take away anything from this video, I just want it to be that you're not broken. You're not a failure. You're just learning how to get out of survival mode. And that's a process. And you should be proud of yourself for taking on that process. But just because this is a process does not mean that you should stay in harm's way while you're working on it. Sometimes the only way that we can heal is by removing ourselves from the cause of the pain, right? And that's not easy, but it is necessary. Thank you so much for watching. I hope this helped in some way. I'll be praying for you, and I can't wait to see you in the next one.